Welcome to the Sales Buzz. I'm Rick Ammey, your host for this exciting Brooks Group webinar. Thanks for tuning in. Today's topic, how to make sure your salespeople don't get trapped. And I'm here with Bill Brooks, CEO of the Brooks Group. Bill has been a sales consultant for 28 years. He heads the Brooks Group, an international sales and sales management consulting firm based in Greensboro, North Carolina. He has authored, count them, 18 books, including 3 national bestsellers. Now let's get started. Bill, and the question, this question just leaped to my mind when I knew we were going to cover this topic. What in the world does it mean to be trapped from a salesperson's point of view?
Let me tell you an interesting story behind this. Several weeks ago, I was with my wife at a mountain resort. She was going to a seminar, and I accompanied her for a couple of days. And there was a gentleman there who was attending the same seminar that she was attending. And I went over to this before the thing started, and he himself now is an artist, had very long hair, very kind of an avant-garde kind of guy. And he and I were having a conversation, and after a while he said, well, what do you do? And we had a conversation about that. And as it turns out, he used to be a purchasing manager, and he said, would you like to hear how I used to trap salespeople? And then he proceeded to tell me what he would do to trap them. Then I went back into my own experience, I went back into my own research, and I said, wait a minute, salespeople can get trapped in one of two ways. It can be an overt action on the part of the prospect, like this fellow was talking about, or it can be a mistake that they make that forces them into a corner, and they essentially trap themselves. Now, any sales manager worth his or her salt that's watching this knows that he or she has seen their salespeople either talk their way into a trap or get caught in a trap. And then what happens is you can't extricate yourself and you lose the sale.
And what do you mean by trap, literally?
A trap is something from which you cannot extricate yourself. Let me give you a really good example. Someone asks you a question. If you answer them, you're baiting yourself for a trap. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. I'd like you to ask me a question, Rick, and something like, when can you have it ready for delivery?
All right. Well, we're thinking about buying from you. When can you have this particular product for delivery?
Next week.
Oh, that's great.
All right. Now, think about this for a minute. Ask me the same question.
When can you have this product ready for delivery?
Well, let me ask you a question, if I might. When would you need it?
Actually, I'd like to have it sooner than that, within the next 3 days.
All right. Now, the second scenario was independent from the first one.
Right.
The way you answered it was perfect. But watch. Let's say that it's a totally independent environment. You didn't know anything about the first scenario. And you asked me this question again. When can you have it for delivery?
And when can you have it for delivery?
When do you need it?
3 days from now.
All right. Now think about this. In the first scenario, I said we can have it next week.
Right.
I guarantee you, to make a sale, I can have it ready for you in 3 days. I asked you, when would you like to have it? I did not give you an answer. By answering, you give the wrong answer and you back yourself into a trap.
Oh, I see. You want to leave it open.
You want to leave it open. All right, here, let's take a look at it in a different way.
All right.
Ask me any question.
How does your product compare to your chief competitor?
Well, we're much better because we have better paint, better delivery, and better customer service. All right, now, ask me the same question again.
How does your product compare to your chief competitor?
Well, it really depends on what the customer is really looking for, because we all do it in different kinds of ways. What is most important to you about a purchase decision like this?
Oh, I see what you're getting at. What you're doing is if you're not trapped, you can turn it back around and gather more information from the prospect.
What you do is you reposition your presentation.
Exactly.
And here's what it is. You sell it to them exactly the way they want to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me give you another example. How much does it cost? What kind of a budget range do you have in mind?
Mm-hmm.
See, you don't want to give them an answer. Okay, let's say, for example, you're a communicator, okay, and you
Right.
sell communication services.
No.
Let's say I said to you, Rick, when would you like to be able to? When can you come and deliver the seminar?
Well, now let me turn it. Can I turn it around on
Please.
you? And let me tell you exactly what I do. Okay. So what'll happen is I'll be talking to a prospect, and a prospect will say to me, "We are really interested in doing this. How much does it cost?" And what I'll say, "Well, it depends. Tell me what it is you're trying to accomplish.
There you are. There you are.
How many people have you got in mind? How much time have you got that you want to invest? How soon do you need it? Have you got something going on right now that needs this to be done right away?"
Now, I'll bet, Rick, tell me if I'm wrong here.
All right.
I'll bet that you learned that by answering a question with a declarative statement and losing some sales early on, so you figured it out.
Well, yeah, I found that if you don't establish the value of what it is you provide to the client on the front end, and you go, then you've got it backwards.
So what happens is if you respond, let's keep it in the
Right.
parameter.
Exactly.
If you respond to a question with a declarative statement, you run a big risk of doing that.
Yes, exactly.
So the best way to do it is just ask them a question. That's one way to get trapped. Let me give you the second way to get trapped.
Okay.
This is what this former purchasing manager told me that he did. He bought technical equipment. So he would ask a question of a salesperson that he knew the answer to see what the salesperson would say. And here's the example he would give. This requires a 50-volt battery. Is that correct? He knew it required a 25-volt battery. And he would then determine how effective the salesperson was by the answer that the salesperson gave. If he gave the wrong answer, it was either he or she didn't know what it required, they were trying to be a hit and miss expert by just selling them something. The best thing to do is if you don't know the answer, say you'll find the answer. So what he would do is he would ask a salesperson a question that he knew the answer to, see if they gave the correct answer. If they didn't give the correct answer, he knew they didn't know what they were doing, or they weren't going to service the account, or they were trying to jam something down his throat.
Okay, well, this leads to a key question I want to ask you, and you're basically dealing with it right now, which is why would a prospect, a potential client, want to trap the salesperson? You've already partially answered it.
Because inevitably, particularly in a business environment, it's almost like obligatory to have this contest. There's always tension in a sales environment. And there's something else that's even more critical than that, Rick. In today's business environment, the decisions that people make can impact their entire careers. They could lose their job with the wrong decision. So they're going to resort to a lot of different things they have to do to make sure that they are buying the right thing for the right reason, at the right price, with the right application, that they're buying from the right supplier, that that thing is going to be serviced, that it's going to be delivered. They're going to do everything they have to do. That's particularly true in the latter scenario. The first scenario, quite frankly, Rick, the salesperson talks himself or herself into trouble, and they trap themselves. So either the prospect will try to trap you, or we trap ourselves.
Well, how prevalent is this from the prospect standpoint of trying to trap the salesperson?
I'm not so sure that it's a conscious thing. I think if someone's an experienced buyer of products or services, I'll do that. I've been in business a long time. I will ask somebody a question like I don't know to see what they say. And I can tell you right now if they know anything. And if they know anything, that's good. If they don't, I don't want to deal with them. So I think that it may be more prevalent than our sales managers out there and salespeople think it is. This is one of those little known, closely guarded secrets of buyers. Now, here's the other thing. I think the simple skill of answering a question with a question could be the most critical selling skill there is. And I don't believe that people are being isolated enough and taught that skill over and over and over again. And a lot of our recent work in our seminars, our audio programs, our CDs, our DVDs, all that kind of stuff, I'm spending a lot of time on this answering a question with a question. Here's what's really neat about this, Rick. This goes back to the 20s and 30s. This is old sales stuff, but it still works.
Well, and since what we're talking about is how to make sure that your salespeople don't get trapped, and you want to make sure that they don't get in that situation, there are 6 ways that you must teach your salespeople how to handle the trap that is being laid for them.
Okay, now.
So before we get to those 6, set this up for us.
All right. What there are, they're not really, there are 6 ways, but they are reactive to 6 specific situations.
Oh, I see.
In other words, there are 6 types of critical situations, and then you have to know how to deal with it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so let's take a look at the first situation.
All right.
Okay?
Bad-mouthing competition to gain advantage.
Yeah, bad mouthing. What they'll do is that they'll ask you to say something about your competition. Tell me, how do you compare against so-and-so? Okay? Now, all of a sudden, no matter what you say or do, it could come across as bad-mouthing. And the worst thing that you want to do is to bad-mouth the competition. Now, this is fundamental and simple, but it's more simple than it is easy. So here's an interesting way to handle it. You may want to say, well, let me ask you this. How much do you know about our competition? What have you seen about them that's particularly appealed to you?
Answering a question with a question.
Yes. See, so now what happens is I'm asking them how much do they know and what do they like about the competition? Here's a great way to say it. Well, based on what you've seen, if you could change anything about them, what would it be?
Which, of course, gives you an opening through which you can drive a truck with
because
regard
now
to
what
your
happens
sales pitch.
Is
Right.
if you can differentiate, you differentiate it around the way that they want to change the situation and what they're looking for to improve upon. So you're not bad-mouthing them. You're giving their information back and you're positioning what you have in the proper way.
And you know, it seems to me that what you're saying too, with regard to trapping, that there are really 2 psychological dynamics. One is they're testing you, the salesperson. They're testing your expertise, your ability to do what you do. But the other thing too is they're expressing, in a sense, their nervousness, are they not, about wanting to make the sale, as you said earlier. Now, another situation that comes up with regard to trapping is the competition bad-mouthing you to gain an advantage. Now, how do you deal with that?
That's an interesting one. Part of the thing is, as we often teach, we say, look, there are 4 key players inside of the account. One of them is your internal advocate. The internal advocate is the person who perhaps can influence the decision or is part of the decision. In some cases, you're lucky if they're the check writer because they can make the decision. But the real truth of the issue is that you need some inside information to find out if you're being bad-mouthed. Because you don't want to assume that you're being bad-mouthed if you're not being bad-mouthed. Okay? Now, for example, I got some information the other day from one of my internal advocates with an account that she called me and said, this is what you have to be able to overcome because they have a concern about this. Now, I know that was planted by a competitor. Now, I'm not going to call the competitor and say, don't you badmouth me, because you know what? They're only going to badmouth me more. But I knew I was being badmouthed. So the secret is, you need to know if you're being badmouthed. Okay?
But
that's
Bill,
the first step.
Okay. Well, the question is going through my mind, and I've seen this happen, is what if you're sitting there having a conversation with a prospect, the prospect says, well, you know, I'm interested in working with you, but I have heard that you guys are awfully expensive.
Okay.
And in fact, one of your competitors told us that you are twice as expensive as he is, which is you are finding out on the spot that you're being bad-mouthed by your competition. Now, what do you do with a situation like that?
All right. Good observation and a good suggestion, Rick. Let me give you an example. Some of you who are watching may have seen the book I did with Dr. Larry Steinmetz, How to Sell at Margins Higher Than Your Competitors. This is another whole skill set that goes outside of this, and now the salesperson has to say, okay, I'm being bad-mouthed by the competition. The first thing I'm not going to do is to take them head on and disagree with them. Because clearly now they know that I'm going to try to disagree with them because I want to make the sale. The issue here is money. So I'm going to continue with my questioning. I'm not going to bail, as you see.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
But watch this.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes time to present my product, here's what I'm going to say. We perhaps are not the least expensive game in town. But before I give you the price, I'd like to make sure you understand everything it includes. And now what you do is you include things that you have that the competition does not have, which explains why the pricing is where it is.
And what you have done, Bill, is you have taken a bad-mouthing situation that's been given to you, you've converted it into an objection that then needs to be responded to.
Yes, it's neutralized, and now what happens is the skillful salesperson will know how to do that. Now, the superior performer in sales will make 10, 100, 1,000 times more than the average performer. People have to work at their craft to know what to do. So I said, okay, they're bad-mouthing me. I'm not going to deal with it. They were specifically talking about price. Never quote price to an unsold buyer. I will say, okay, I understand. Later on in the sales process, I know they're still concerned about price. So I want to make sure you understand everything that the price includes. Now what I do is I give him everything that he's after, and now the competition can't compare to me. I will outsell them. I will not badmouth them back.
And again, if I could say this again, because I think it's an incredible insight, what you have done is instead of getting defensive, instead of maybe reverse bad-mouthing
or
offensively, what you're doing is you're just converting it into a standard objection, which in this case, the example I was using was price. And you're converting it to the standard price objection, and then you know how to deal with that if you're any good as a salesperson, and that forces you out of being in a defensive mode. But getting back, I interrupted you. You were talking about trapping from the standpoint of being bad-mouthed behind the scenes, and that's another animal altogether. And I don't think I let you finish that.
Yeah, the second part is when they clearly badmouth. They say something to you directly. You know, so and so, your competitor says you're, you know, and you gave that example with the price.
Right.
And that's the strategy. We flipped over to that strategy.
Right. Okay.
So one is going to be covert, one is going to be rather overt. And this anticipatory kind of thing is always critical. The more I know before I get in there, the better off I'm going to be.
But and I don't want to leave this because I think this happens all the time to all of us. Again, if you find out that you are covertly being badmouthed and being set up for a trap, then what is the dynamic that changes when you come in to make the sale if you know that you've been badmouthed in advance?
Very good question. Here's what happens in the real world. If you know that's happening, your antennae are up.
Right.
And you now are reading body language, you're reading the people in the room if it's a group situation, and you are looking for when these subtle statements are made. You know that they would never come up with that information on their own. And there will be somebody in that room, or that person will bring that up. Now you've identified the direct pipeline between the competitor's bad-mouthing and to whom they do the bad-mouthing. And now what you do is you need to work with that person to either win them personally, to win them in terms of the better questioning, selling more value, and what a great question. After selling for over 30 years, I can remember being in boardrooms, and I knew who the advocates were, and I knew who I was going to have trouble with. Now, here's one of the things that I would do. I would try to find out, tell me about their personality, tell me how long they've been there, tell them what their relationship is with the competitor, tell me why you think they want to have the competitor. Now, that doesn't mean you teach to them or work to them, but you need to know. It's more strategy than tactics, and as I often say, salespeople are far more tactical than they are strategic.
In other words, being forewarned is forearmed.
You got it.
Okay. Third situation in which your salespeople can get trapped: misleading questions to determine your expertise and agenda. And you've already kind of
I've alluded to that.
Okay.
And what it was this intriguing conversation with this guy. And he told me, remember I said a few minutes ago, let me show you how I used to trap salespeople. I went, I can think back now, going through this, and people would say, well, when you do your sales training, tell me what happens with the results. Well, the results depend on whether they're taking coaching with it, or our return on investment program, or whether they have the sales management program that goes with it, how much customization or tailoring we have to do, whether they use coaching reports as well as hiring reports. There are a whole bunch of factors that go with this thing. And so what happens is, what I can't do is I can't give them an answer and say, okay, we get this type of increase. I need to say, what type of increase are you trying to accomplish? But more importantly, let me ask you a question about some of the things that we do and see which most appeal to you. Then I'll be able to give you a definitive answer. See, with us, they ask that kind of question. Now, with technical sales, they will ask a question, again, like this guy did with the voltage on the batteries. So they might ask you a technical question, and if you give them the wrong answer, you're sunk. Now, the real secret here is you don't want to avoid it, because then it looks like you're backpedaling.
What I realized? I realized what trapping it is doing. Trapping, in a sense, is making the whole discussion about the salesperson. When in fact, what the salesperson needs to be doing is making it back again to the prospect's issues. And you're trying to hold the mirror back up to it and reversing it back the other way.
Rick,
right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right on. Let me tell you what you picked up and saw. And again, those of you who are watching this, who have been through our sales training, will see that everything we do, everything we teach, everything we talk about, everything we emphasize, is that you have to put the focus on the prospect and what they need and what they want. And no matter how much they try to bang it back at you, you got to bang it back at them, because at the end of the day, it's all about what they want. It's not what you want to have happen. They buy for their reasons, not for yours.
It's not you sitting there talking about how swell we are, how long we've been in business, how many clients we have, how big they have. It's not about that. It's about them.
You see, and here's the issue. You're telling them how great the atmosphere is in Saturn, and they want to go to Mars.
Exactly.
And so what happens is, that's the reality.
Situation number 4, we've been talking about this too, and to my way of thinking, based on what you're telling us, is this is really sort of the bottom line tactic, and that is failing to answer a question with the question.
You'll notice we've talked about this before. We wanted to include it again because it's so important. It is so critical. Watch this. Rick, how do you feel today?
Pretty darn good.
Okay. Something like that you can answer because there's nothing hidden.
Yeah,
okay?
Right.
But again, I asked you, when can you have delivery? Tell me about your customer service. How long have you been in business, right? All of those issues. If a prospect early on, not during the sales presentation necessarily, but early on, and perhaps in the sales presentation itself, asks you a question, I want you to put this in your head. You don't answer them. You answer a question with a question. They're trying to trap you.
So let's do that again.
Okay.
So you asked me, how am I feeling?
How do you feel today, Rick?
Well, more important to me actually is how you're doing, Bill. That's because actually you're my best friend, and I want to know how you're doing.
Well, I feel pretty good. In fact, I feel very good today.
And so what has happened is, instead of it being that little exchange, instead of that little exchange being perfunctory, now it has become a compliment to you, and now you are invested in it.
And here's the truth of this.
Yeah.
As I look back over 30 years of selling, I don't know how many times somebody asked me a question, I gave them an answer, and they said, thank you very much. I blew the sale. I answered it in a way that they didn't want to have. If I don't know what answer they're seeking, I can't. That doesn't mean that you lie, but you need to find out, is what you have falling within the parameters of what they want to have accomplished. If it does, you have a prospect. But this trapping thing will get you.
I can see that.
It'll get you.
But what about talking to the wrong person?
Well, that's the ultimate trap. See, here's what happens. If you aim too low in the organization, you've got a problem. Because then this person, in order to get buy-in to what you do, has to go up the organization. Right? You and I were talking about this before the broadcast.
Yeah.
And here's what happened. You can't go around them because you offend them, and then what happens is they will badmouth you, and now you've really been trapped, you see? So the best thing to do is to try to position yourself as well as you can so that decision makers who create budgets, formulate budgets, develop time plans and strategy will be interested in talking with you about buying your product. And there's a whole psychology of this. But what you want to do is you want to dress one notch better than your competitor, and you want to hit the organization, the prospect, one level higher than they enter into it. Otherwise, you're going to get trapped.
Serving in our 6th of the situations that can trap a salesperson. Serving as a source of comparison for product, price, or service.
Yeah. Here's the interesting question. Rick, how many times do you think salespeople across this country and around this world are strictly brought in for a couple reasons? I want you to answer this. One of the reasons is so that a committee can say we talked to several suppliers.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Another one is getting a request for proposal or request for quotation through the mail unsolicited and spending hour upon hour upon hour responding to it.
And the reason they're doing that is they're trying to please somebody up the line or somebody else in the organization. They want to indicate that you're just one of many people that they're
So they
canvassing.
can say that we've done this.
We've done this, but they have in mind already usually who it is they're going to do business with.
I can give you. Oh, they do. Let me tell you. You know how you win an RFQ? You're involved in writing the specs.
Right. But they write the specs based on somebody that they've already been working with.
That they've already been working with, or
Exactly.
they want to buy from, and then you jump through hoops to do that. And when you do it, I have two in particular that myself got involved with. So let me confess here.
Okay.
Each one of them took me more than 50 hours to respond to. I had to 50 hours myself, and it was just eyewash. Say, another way to be trapped is you're just there for eyewash. Here's another way that this thing works out. They just want to compare pricing so that they can go back to their current supplier or the one that's the favorite supplier and say, I can get it from such and such. And here's what's really crazy. What would that other supplier do? They're going to drop the price.
And now you're in a commodity fight.
Now you're in a commodity fight, and here's what I say. I say, let me ask you a question. How many years have you been paying this? Well, here's what you do. Ask them to give you the credit for the difference so that you buy here, you pay what, because you drop your price. What goes through the mind of the buyer is these people have been zapping me for the last 5 years. Every one of those scenarios, Rick, every single one of them are ones that will set you up for the trap. And I'm going to suggest to you that this webinar that we've done probably is not something that's dealt with anywhere on the internet or audio or training. We have uncovered this over the last couple of years. This trapping is more prevalent than people think it is. And I will submit to you that more salespeople have lost more business because they were trapped than anybody will ever imagine.
And we thank you for pointing it out.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks for joining the Sales Buzz. This has been a Brooks Group production.